Okay, hello everyone. Welcome today. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our hybrid campaigns, creating and running successful events webinar. I am Kelsey Woodward, the content marketing manager here at GiveSmart, and today's circumstances are pretty uncharted, so to say the least. So we're finding our way, and I think that today is going to provide great insights with these traditional fundraisers that we already know and how we can blend that with virtual components, as well as some fresh ideas and what exactly hybrid fundraisers are. So we have two lovely speakers today. Marilyn Moss is the president of Event Group, a full-service event production and fundraising company based in New York City. And they produce events for a diverse range of clients nationwide and have worked diligently in the past few months helping their clients navigate through the ever-changing circumstances that COVID-19 has brought to the nonprofit and event production world. Joey Goone serves as president of Utopia Entertainment. And not only does he help Utopia produce virtual and hybrid events, but he's also at the helm of their creative team and helping nonprofits exceed their goals in this current and challenging environment. And last but not least is my colleague, Brandon Stepp, Director of Marketing. His experience spans the sports industry and nonprofit work across the Midwest. He is a data guru for us at GiveSmart, whose finger is on the pulse, and he'll give great insights today on what we're seeing in the market across the country, from GiveSmart perspective and all of the clients that we help. So thank you everyone for joining today.
Thanks.
Hey everyone.
Thank you.
Cool. Hopefully everyone is staying cool wherever you're watching this webinar from. Hot day today in New York. So, hopefully you are relaxing and enjoying. And so we anticipate going around 45 minutes today with content. We'll be taking questions as we go. So you see the little questions feature, feel free to pop them in as questions come to you. And if it's relevant to the topic at hand, we will address it. Otherwise, we'll save it for the question portion at the end. And also, we are recording this webinar today. So later, if you want to look out for the link for that to watch in case you miss anything or have to leave early, we will be sending that your way. So let's start with the agenda. We're going to run through what is a hybrid, different hybrid events, how to execute them, and pros and cons that come with those, as well as ways to measure success. So let's launch a quick poll. So first, when you hear hybrid fundraiser, what does that mean to you? We could go ahead and launch the poll. So if you guys could all weigh in on kind of what you mean, there's no right or wrong answer. If you feel that multiple answers fit, go ahead and select whichever answers you feel best. And while folks say in, Marilyn, could you speak to a little bit to common successes that you have seen with your clients over the last couple of months, despite everything that is going on?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. So when everything started to change, we had a lot of clients that were in different stages of planning for their events. A lot of them hadn't even started yet, and a lot of them were only a couple of weeks away. Those groups were in a really kind of scary situation, not knowing which way to go. But we did have a couple of tremendous successes. I'm very proud of the Latino Community Foundation, which is a group in San Francisco. We were really only 4 weeks away from their event when they decided to go virtual, but I'm really defining them now as a hybrid event before we even had that term. So they did about 75% of their event pre-recorded and 25% live. They really wanted to interact and feel connected with their constituents, and that's why they went for the live option. So, I think it's really good to have a ratio of mostly pre-recorded to make sure things go well tech-wise. But they were tremendously successful, raised over their goal.
Great. So let's see the results. And over to you, Brandon. What do you make of this?
I think this is exactly what we were expecting. The people at Agala with the online streaming, I think we're getting a lot of that, and we're going to talk about that. So the two main items here, in-person activities and a streaming element or online fundraising element, are certainly something we're going to talk through. And we actually asked this poll of some of our team, our customer success team, so we can show those results too, as it very much coincides, which is really great to see. So you can see here, 52% of our employees, our team that are working with events, are seeing the exact same thing. So Joey, Marilyn, I think we're going to have a lot of good stuff to talk about here today as we dive into hybrids, because I think people are definitely looking for the solutions that we're going to be talking about. Start things off though, how we're defining a hybrid today. You know, we started using this term a while ago here as something that we're seeing more and more. And as Marilyn said, the virtual is now becoming kind of the hybrid, but it really is that combining of an in-person element with virtual fundraising elements. So we'll dive in and talk about that a little bit further.
Yeah, and so another thing we want to touch on here is why exactly are we talking about them today, and what else should we be looking for?
So what's unique about a virtual event is those run about 45 to 60 minutes, and we're going to dig into things you can do around those to really capture people during that time and make sure you're maximizing it. I mean, Marilyn, 60 minutes is about what you're seeing as well, right? That coincides.
Yeah, give or take, we're aiming for 60 minutes. I think you have to be, aware of people's attention spans if they're watching from home. But I think if you went into 75 minutes would be a good goal.
Yeah. And Joey, does that pretty much coincide for you as well?
Yeah, I would say 45 to 60 minutes. For hybrids, we're suggesting a little bit longer. So because you do have people attending in person and you want to be able to entertain them and give them an experience that they're paying for. If I could play devil's advocate for just a moment, it's not so much about the clock as much as it is about the content. So think of your event as a book, right? And what fills those pages. People are looking for an experience right now. And so just really quickly want to pop, 4 quick examples of fun ideas that you could do where you're, for your virtual and hybrid events. And so before your event even starts, how about an invitation video that goes out digitally? Because remember, we no longer have geographical restrictions. So leverage a celebrity or an athlete or your recipients to invite people to your event. And then during your event, what we've seen that's worked really well are 4 quick things. DJ playing music at the beginning with sponsor logos looping, having pre-recorded videos of your recipients thanking everyone, carpool karaoke, we'll do more on that later, and then live watch parties, which we'll have more on that later as well. And we have a more detailed video to give you ideas of what to do and what not to do. I think Kelsey is going to send that out. The GiveSmart team will send that out in the chat box. So you can find those resources, those videos, and more helpful documents on our website.
You don't have to be a good singer to do carpool karaoke, obviously, but it's always fun to have that element. Why don't we dive in, Kelsey, into some of these types?
Yeah. I wanted to say let's go into the different types of hybrid fundraisers, how to run them, and we'll discuss some pros and cons too, because some might be a good fit for one organization where they might not be for another. And we also have, again, the questions in chat open. So if there are anything that you guys listening have pulled off and you want to share with us, feel free to ping us your ideas, because we are curious to hear. So Brendan, over to you and Marilyn on the hybrid gala.
Yeah, well, first things first, with any upcoming in-person component, you need to keep up with what's happening in your area. We are not experts on every single city and every single state of what's going on, but make sure that you are complying with any social distancing rules, any other rules that are in place or mandates that are in place. This is not here to talk about, what's going on. It's more to talk about how we can really benefit your organization, put your cause first. So it's also important to know your donors, listen to their feedback, and we highly recommend communicate with them as you're planning. I know, Marilyn, when we were talking in preparation, like that's a key thing, right? To know if people are even interested in a live component. So surveys, calls, emails, social media, find out if there's legs to what you're trying to plan before you put all this time into it, and then no one wants to actually go to the live piece, or no one wants to do virtual. So that's a big piece of this as you are planning. Get the opinions of others as they're going to be the ones supporting your organization. But as we jump in here, Marilyn, are we seeing hybrid galas being executed, and what are people talking about right now as solutions around pulling these things off?
Yeah, Brandon, I think what you said about knowing what's happening in your area is really important. I know in New York right now, we just entered like phase 4 of our reopening. Not sure if all the rest of the country can be considering the same things right now. But what we're seeing is a lot of, the events happening now and that were scheduled this spring were purely virtual with a couple of live pieces. What we're seeing for the fall, and in fact, I spoke to a prospective client yesterday. He may actually be watching. Hi, Norris. About, in the fall or late fall, early winter, about having a reception with, maybe some of your top donors, and doing something in person, maybe having different groups coming in at certain times, so that your guests are rotating and you're, keeping a limited number of people in the room. And then also having that be your live streaming location so that you can send that out to everyone. And then that's really different from what we're seeing already for next spring. In fact, right now, my staff is out on some old traditional site surveys at like Cipriani downtown in New York for people who are planning for June 2021. So that's already starting. I do think, though, that having these virtual components that we're all developing now are going to be part of our live events, moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, with that limited number of people in the room, the big question is, how do you decide who to invite and manage that? And having that layered approach or having that limited approach, either way, there's only so many people, right?
Right. I think, what we've been talking about with our clients is, your dinner committee obviously would be invited. Even some of the venues are telling us that if you normally would be selling that table of 10, they might not be able to have 10 people at a table. So, but definitely you would tier it, right? You would start with your top donors, and then your board and your committees.
And maybe sponsors if they, if they would like to be top donors, which we always like to have, right?
Right.
Cost is obviously a factor, and often the question is it even worth it financially to have a gala-like event with only 50 people who can be in attendance? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that, when everything happened with COVID, and it gave me a lot of time to reflect for a couple of weeks on why I actually even do what I do. And I realized, there's a lot of power to having people together in a room. And I think now people are really craving interaction, camaraderie. You're all there for, the same cause. And so I do really look forward to, even if it's 50 people in the room, at least starting somewhere with that and trying to engage people.
So just to expand on what you were saying, Marilyn, I think it's a brilliant idea just to have those people in that room. And so for an organization we're talking to out of Chicago, they already have the hotel booked for their hybrid event next year, and they're talking in 2021 spring. They're talking about how do we bring our sponsors in and do something really creative, and the hotel just happens to have all these amazing conference rooms. So in those conference rooms, we're actually going to be selling those as sponsorships and having 8 to 10 people in each of the 5 to 6 conference rooms. As they're going to have their own private menus, their own servers. They're going to feel like VIP treatment. The red carpet's going to be rolled out. They're also going to have 50 to 75 people in the main ballroom with all these other various conference rooms in the hotel that we could bring in as the production company throughout the stream and say, hey, we're going to go to conference room 1. It's, XYZ Corporation. How are you guys doing? And hey, we're doing really well. We're having so much fun. Yeah, this is awesome. Okay, great. Back to the program. So just be thinking about little things like that you can incorporate for your sponsors as well.
That's awesome. That exclusivity is really, a key part of some of this is you have the opportunity to recognize some people that maybe you were just traditionally giving them a table that was closer to the stage, right? There's some new ways to incorporate that, and that's part of the virtual and the technology that's out there. Speaking of live streams, though, Joey, you guys do these in your sleep, but let's just talk a little bit about, how do we loop folks in at home? What are some of the things that you're recommending when it comes to a live stream event in this 60-minute window that people have?
So here's what I encourage everybody to imagine. Imagine you're in the seat of Saturday Night Live studio audience, and you're anxiously awaiting Adam Sandler and Kevin Hart to walk on stage, right? Where they do their cute 5-minute skit before the show begins. You hear the tech crew count down 3, 2, 1, boom, the camera goes live. Backstage, right? We're backstage, the camera's moving and following us around. Knock, knock, the door opens, it's Taylor Swift. We're walking down the hallway, we're following this camera, and oh my God, it's Eddie Murphy. Then all of a sudden the camera fades to black. The stream cuts to camera 2. It's your studio audience. There's 150 people, 200 people in the crowd. The camera's back in the room, and here they come, your hosts for the evening, Adam Sandler and Kevin Hart. Now just replace the names. In your case, the backstage shots are your recipients. They're getting ready for the event. This is pre-recorded, obviously, right? But they're getting ready for the event, and they're doing their makeup, or the guys are putting on their ties. Your hosts are obviously not Adam Sandler or Kevin Hart. I mean, that'd be great if we could get them for your event.
I'm okay with that if that's an option.
But it's your executive director or your MC or your auctioneer team for the evening. And so make your event look and feel that exciting. The screens, the cameras, the studio, the lights, the engagement. Be the first to do something. You have an opportunity right now to pioneer a movement. So organizations look at you as the first. And that's what we're saying for the live stream is don't just put up an iPad in the back of the room as a DIY. Engage a professional, make it creative, make it really fun and engaging.
No, that's awesome. And you mentioned pre-recorded.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to jump in here. We just had a question come in that I think is relevant and worth asking. So someone is asking, we recently had a very successful virtual fundraiser and would like to include a virtual component when we go back to our in-person event. This event is usually over 5 hours, roving affair, and I'm wondering how would you still distill this down to 60-minute virtual event? So I guess, Joey, when people go back to in-person events, do you foresee these virtual components kind of staying in this small condensed fashion, or something that they'll be able to continue to weave throughout an event that might be more than 5 hours?
Sure. I love this question. I actually had this question yesterday, and I talked to Shannon from Raising Paddles, who we're doing a lot of consulting with, or she's partnering with, with our team as our auctioneering specialist. And there's 2 different ways you can look at your program. So the old way to run your program would be to you bring your virtual attendees in at the beginning of your program so they're able to experience the event from A to Z. Now, the challenge, I think, goes back to your question is what happens when your in-person attendees are seated at the tables? What do your virtual attendees do? So you've got to pivot now and rework your programming. This is the option that we're going with for hybrids. You start your event with a 60-minute cocktail hour that has food and a soft entertainment. And then after everybody in person eats and is finished mingling and getting their cocktails, then they sit down at the tables, right? You go into your ask, your appeal, your live auction, your video, your paddle raise. And then after you do your fundraising, which by the way, that's when all your virtual attendees join, is during the program. And then afterwards, we celebrate with your after party. So you do your DJ, or an organization we're working with is actually upcharging for their after party. And they're having a panel of St. Louis Cardinals and St. Louis Blues players to stay on afterwards. People will pay for experiences like that. So to answer the question, it's just reworking your program, doing it a little bit differently. So that way you don't have people that are just sitting, while your in-person attendees are eating. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. That's a great recommendation and as we're talking through this, you mentioned pre-recorded elements. It sounds like you recommend pre-recording some of these elements that bring kind of that appeal and that draw of a production to this. Can you talk a little bit about the pre-recorded and how that kind of loops in with what you guys have seen?
Sure. Are we speaking now about hybrid events? Because
like the feel of your event. So like, how do you want your event to feel? Kind of elaborate on that concept.
Well, I would say that, first of all, back to what Marilyn said, and I just echo this, you're being mindful of people's time when you're doing pre-recorded content because you're able to control your programming by the second, right? Some people, executive directors out there, I know you may be a little guilty of this, you get impassioned and you maybe sometimes go a little rogue on the microphone. And so your pre-recorded content is a way to refine that and make your program and your message a little more succinct. But hybrid, you really want it to be authentic, right? You want to have your executive director up on stage thanking everybody and welcoming everyone. You want to have your auctioneer live making the ask on the stage, but there are some pre-recorded elements that will help you record, or your video production company, AV company will help you record beforehand. And that could be your recipients thanking everybody, your Fund the Future or your Spotlight appeal, which, by the way, it has to be spot on, especially for people who don't know your organization. That video really needs to tell the message and tug at the heartstrings so that you can hit those fundraising dollars. And we actually have, because we realize not everybody can be live at the event, we have a sheet that our marketing team put together. We'll put our email address in the chat box. If you want, we have a pre-recorded video guidelines sheet that I think will be very helpful for you. If you plan to pre-record videos, just email us and we'll make sure you get a copy of that.
Okay, great. And Joey, quick question before we move off of this. We had a question that came through. Says, we've seen a lot of hybrid events where the transitions between pre-recorded and live aspects seem really messy. So any quick tips on how to make those transitions smoother?
Hire a professional production team. There's your simple answer for that.
Yeah, the professionals know best on that for sure. And I think we're going to touch on another set of professionals too here with the live auction. Joey, I'm really interested to talk about some of the confidence monitors that you've been telling me about with live auction and live appeal. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're helping auctioneers with bidding activity in a live auction and live appeal setting?
Sure. So this is the beautiful Shannon and Aaron from Raising Paddles. This was an event we produced a couple of weeks ago. I know Karen's on the call, so shout out to Karen from Quest Academy. Your event was absolutely amazing. And so we do something called simulcast. So that is where you're leveraging a production company to ensure that everything happens seamlessly. So Shannon was able to communicate in real time with Karen, the developmental director of the organization, who was monitoring people back at home that were bidding virtually, right? So if they have questions or they're having issues with getting their bids in, some people, and my grandparents in their 70s and 80s, they still want to tune in, but maybe they're having trouble with the technology. Well, we're able to communicate with those people in real time using simulcast, helping them and navigating, right? And so Shannon has all these monitors around her. We call those confidence monitors. So she's not only able to monitor everyone in the audience, but she can see all of the bids coming in from virtual attendees as well. And that's really important to ensure that we don't miss or leave any money on the table.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And Marilyn, what are you seeing with some of your clients? We've heard people talking about having like a proxy bidder in the room or something to that extent. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on right now with these different live auctions and live appeals?
Sure. So this is just my experience with my clients. I don't want to discourage anyone from doing a live auction, but just seems that this year my clients are opting to have a really robust silent auction. Maybe if they have one spectacular item come up, they would offer it live and use proxy bidders for that, depending on the giving software. I know, but the live appeal is key. Like, I think that's where everyone can spend their time and their resources. Part of the beauty of these virtual and hybrid events is we used to be restricted to the 600 people that could fit in the ballroom. And the event we did for LCF has had over 10,000 views, and they had donations from all of those people. I mean, it was a tremendous way to increase your outreach. So I think the live appeal and using your auctioneer is, really going to add a lot to the bottom line on this. So that's what my clients are doing this fall, at least.
Great. That's really helpful for a lot of people that I know are asking the questions today about the live appeal and the live auction. One example of a hybrid type event is hosted house parties. So this would be where sponsors or donors or board members each have their own quote unquote table that they host at their house or at a private venue. And people are streamed in through simulcast, like Joey was talking, or some of the technologies that are out there to bring people together virtually. Marilyn, what are your thoughts on some of these types of hybrid events, or maybe some examples of things that people are trying to test out? And then obviously there's fundraising components that fit really well here too, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of people are, as you mentioned, having watch parties. So one of the board members would be hosting a dinner at his home while everyone's then tuning into the live stream. So I think that that's a great way to add a lot of fun to the event. And you can even have, as Joey was mentioning before, having cameras in different rooms at the hotel. Like you can go to board member's house and have all of your constituents in there. And I think there's also, technology is changing so quickly. Some things that we were, only dreamed about doing maybe in March are possible now. And I work with a production company in New York that put together a program called Virtual Tables. So everyone can have their table together on screen and watch the live stream at the same time and interact with each other. So that's something else that we're seeing happening.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in. Yeah, Marilyn, I have a question for you that's come in. So with an in-person event, people's tickets cover food and other benefits. So how do you convince people to buy tickets for something that will be streamed, or for example, an event like this where people might be hosting the party themselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We talk about that a lot. So another benefit of these events is accessibility, right? So people who probably couldn't have afforded the $1,500 ticket to attend your event do have the option to tune in. So a lot of groups are not charging for tickets, and that kind of goes against fundraising, but hoping to engage them for the live ask. And what we did for one of our groups is we had a free ticket, which gave you access to join in, but that we also had enhanced tickets. So, for someone, maybe one of your board members who does still have the ability to buy a $3,000 ticket, they could participate at that level. And I think, people are getting really creative with what they're doing here. We had, one group that with these enhanced tickets was offering people a at-home cocktail kit. So if you could sign up for free, but if you bought a $500 ticket, you were shipped this gift in advance. And I've even seen, some groups that sent to you ahead of time a gift certificate to a local restaurant, so you could order your taken dinner that night while you were watching the live stream all together.
Okay, great.
Any other questions on that one, or do you want to jump on to the next item here?
Let's keep going, because we have some questions that are coming in about golf tournaments. Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. So golf tournaments, this is something that we've almost always treated as a hybrid with a lot of our customers. So golf tournament, traditionally you'll have your players, and then you'll have your silent auction or some other component, hopefully that is a fundraising component on top of it. So already there's a hybrid essence to it, where not everyone is participating live with a golf tournament. You have your folks that maybe aren't golfers but still want to support, or we're going to the the dinner only afterwards. So the ability to pair something like a silent auction, and we recommend silent auctions or different other components that are games of chance, to pair with a golf tournament, because there's that competition element. Oftentimes golfers are competitive. And the other side of it is there's a lot of items that fit really well there. So pairing that up allows your golfers while they're playing to bid, but also people who want to support maybe couldn't to participate. We're also seeing where you can have different waves of golfers. We're still seeing the two waves on the course where it's a little bit spread out. You may need to space your day out a little bit more, but you could also do it where if you play any of select local courses, we're seeing more and more examples where people are allowing donors to select their course and using different tools out there to share the scores, as it still is a competition. It changes it a little bit. You have to, maybe factor in things like handicaps, but it's worth considering as people are getting more and more comfortable with the social distancing. A couple of things we want to encourage, though, with a golf tournament is for sponsors, and have different signage and whole sponsors and incorporate that as much as you can. Drink cart sponsors still are a great value, as they can go around and really talk to more than people who are on the whole at one time. We recommend things like trick shot competitions or longest drives. Those are things that can be recorded virtually, and there are different ways to pull that off. A couple things we're seeing, people are starting to do things like food trucks in the parking lot rather than a seated dinner. It still allows people to mingle, but at a safer distance, and it kind of gets a different essence to the event, but still allowing you to have that meal component. So a couple things around golf and silent auctions that I think are definitely worth investigating even more. And then there's another activity that everyone's very familiar with, which is the 5K or marathon or 10K or whatever it is. I can really only run 5K, so that's why I call it the 5K. I'll work on my long distance, and then we'll change the slide to the marathon. But running together but apart is kind of the concept we're seeing more and more, where people can, over a time period, rather than all in one day, run and accomplish the miles that they commit to, whether it is a 5K or marathon, and still have that text to donate or that champion type fundraising, where people can support your cause, log their mileage through the many different tools that are out there, or do things that are a little bit more outside the ordinary. So laps around the bases in your stadium. If you're a school and the baseball field has, the bases still out, do a competition where people will commit to a certain number of laps, or on their local park, things like that. We still recommend selling T-shirts, hats, and all those different things for people who sign up with a virtual 5K. And there's many examples now of people running these, and we're happy to share many of those if you reach out to us. But also think about afterwards. If it's a one-day event, think of meeting at an outdoor brewery or something that brings people together, still honoring the social distancing rules, and then look to have some type of food or drink option where they can mingle and at a safe distance, of course.
Yeah, and Brandon, I just want to jump in here we're getting a few questions coming in regarding silent auction items. Just before we get too far away from that, the question is, people are still facing challenges to receive silent auction items. What are you suggesting for getting valuable items for a silent auction when things like hotel stays and vacations may not be available or even desirable right now?
So that is a great question, and a common one we've had on our outside the room webinars as well. The data still stands that those things are attractive. So anyone who's reviewed our silent auction study, we'll put a link to that. But the items that resonate and continue to resonate are unique. They're experience oriented, things where they can be similar to a sign up party experience, do work. People are starting to reevaluate their travel type packages, and the key thing to those is make sure there's not a loophole that's going to put you in a bad position. So when you acquire those items, request extra time, request the freedom to be able to use that longer period of time, but also look at things like autographed items and things that are continue to perform well. Continue to perform well. We're seeing continuous success around sports autographed items. Those have a great return on the investment. So I'm happy to, review that further with people, but, staying on the hybrid topic, the things that have been working in the silent auction do still work, but, that silent auction study is going to be your greatest guide. There's tons and tons of data in there on what's working. And I just did an audit of it from April and May, and it's pretty consistent still based on the categories that we have.
All right, great. Thank you.
Another thing we've been talking about, craft events, we're kind of calling these, or, opportunities where, people can semi-gather or get together in smaller groups. So an in-advance winery tour or brewery tour, drink making contests at your local bars. Again, small things that people can do as kind of a sign-up party. So we're talking more and more about selling different groups of experiences. So you can't have 150 people on a yacht for an event, but you can do a boat tour with maybe 10 to 15. look at those different opportunities and those, kind of craft events that are unique, local to your area, your organization. We have one organization that's doing White Claws for a cause, which I've had one White Claw in my entire life. It was decent enough. But I think it's something where they're thinking outside the box, they're appealing to their donor base, and they're looking for things that people are doing right now. So it doesn't have to be 350 people all doing something at once. I think we've got one more example that we want to share. This is the music stroll. So we've talked about this briefly on a couple other webinars, but thinking about if you have local entertainers or people who were performing at your different events, create something outside, something that's easier to kind of accommodate the social distance rules, but allows people to still have that fun and entertainment. And I know Joey's got a really good example of what we are calling the drive-in category. So we're going to jump to that and let him kind of elaborate.
So I love the book Blue Ocean Strategy. It's essentially, in a nutshell, it says that the sharks swim in the red ocean hunting for blood, while the creatives swim in the blue ocean, innovating, pioneering away from the bloody waters. And so the reason I share that with you is because a friend of ours was receiving a bid from a production company that was just trying to sell as opposed to educate and inform. And everybody knows on our side of things that projectors don't work outside. So pictured here is our beautiful LED wall. And on the front of it, it was showing the new Star Wars movie with 75 people in the parking lot. Everybody was enjoying refreshments and popcorn. And this was also being streamed via FM radio stations. Thankfully, it happened to be a beautiful evening, so everybody was outside of their cars. But in the case where it was hot, like it is, Kelsey, over in New York, you could have your windows up and have everything streaming inside of your car with your air conditioning on. So, but we're seeing drive-in experiences happen now with, from everything. I just got off with an organization who's doing a drive-in gala in Chicago. We're seeing trivia nights. Do away with those paper trivia nights and go to a mobile bidding platform so you can track all your trivia, your fundraising online. Just a shameless plug for GiveSmart there. And then drive-in movies, the drive-in trivia nights, drive-in concerts. And then thinking forward, what about doing a drive-in trunk or treat where you have families out and make it a fundraising event with a scary movie on an LED wall that shows after the kids get to go trick-or-treating in the parking lot, which helps you be mindful of social distancing, of course, and the kids will go crazy.
Those are all really great points, Joey. Thank you. And we're going to move on to measuring success. And while if you guys could fill out this second poll about which of these ways are you currently measuring success for campaigns, and while everyone weighs in on that, Joey, just back over to you and sort of what you think the drive-in is. To me, feels like a pretty retro kind of thing that maybe people aren't doing as much of, but what do you sort of see for the future of drive-ins now with the pandemic?
I love the idea of a drive-in. We've actually done about 12.5 drive-in events since the pandemic took a toll, on businesses and individuals alike. And so I think people, if you make the experience really fun, like for instance, the drive-in that was shown on that last picture, it was a family night. So, we actually had a DJ in the parking lot and the DJ was playing music. The kids were having an absolute blast dancing. And, people haven't had this type of interaction in some months now. So anything that you can do to encourage getting people out of that physical separation and bringing people together, because humans are social creatures. We thrive with community and being united. And the drive-in experience definitely allows you a way to be mindful of physical distancing or social distancing and still bring people together.
Totally. All right, well, let's look at those poll results. And Marilyn, what do you make of this in terms of how organizations are measuring their success in campaigns that they run?
Yeah, well, first I want to say, Kelsey, that I think people should consider themselves a success just for even attempting to do this. I know it's scary to make a big change, but I am pretty much in agreement with the results. I have found, the net revenue, actually, your costs are definitely going to go down. So that's something to, take into consideration. And accessibility, I mean, I think that people don't understand like how many people you can reach, and that, you know, your success is in the increased outreach.
Totally. Okay, so moving on now, we're going to look at how exactly are we measuring this success. So over to you, Brandon.
Yeah, so there's really three ways we're going to talk about, as you saw in the poll, but expanding your reach. So Marilyn, can you really, talk a little bit more in detail on, how people can expand the reach, engaging their mission, be accessible for their donor base?
Sure thing. I mean, I would encourage people to live stream on every platform that they can, so, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Some organizations, for very valid reasons, would want this event to be closed. But the more people that can view, the more successful you will be. So I think it also brings up some questions about if you are going to be live streaming on these public platforms, you do need to make sure you're getting the right guidance from a good production partner, because you could run into rights issues with music. So just make sure that you're really getting the right advice on that.
That's a great point. And with, obviously people are going to be dependent on their own Wi-Fi when they're coming in on a live stream or something like that. And sometimes the reach is really being able to just have them have access. So I know, Joey, you're nodding your head. Marilyn, you're nodding your head. I think just making sure preparation, where those hosted parties are going to be, if they're going to be hosted. So for instance, the conference rooms that Joey mentioned, that there's a strong internet connection and you've prepared for that. That's going to help you expand your reach and actually accomplish that goal, right? Because the goal is to make that a seamless experience for them. Spend the extra time of testing as much as you can. The next one, which we all are very aware of, is hitting your fundraising goal. So when you're thinking of, how do I really see if this was successful? Really, either one of you, Marilyn, Joey, as you think about your fundraising goals, how do we measure this? And then the next one we're going to talk about is the net, and what's the difference, I think would be helpful, Marilyn, for people to really get an idea of what we mean by net versus your fundraising goal. Sure.
So, the net is when you take into consideration everything you raised minus your expenses. And, across the country, but I think specifically, I can speak to New York. When you're doing a fundraising event at some of these top venues, your expenses are very high. And, I do hope that very soon we get back to a place where we're having our full galas at these venues, because, trying to support that industry now that's really in bad shape. But organizations now have the advantage of being able to really increase their net, because, with the exception of maybe some gifts you're sending home, and again, I'm going to reiterate, a really good production partner, your expenses are going to be minimal.
And oops, I was on mute. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Marilyn. And now kind of just as we wrap up, I want to have Marilyn and Joey each just share their three big takeaways, and then we're going to jump into Q&A. There have been a lot of really great questions come through. So Joey, over to you. What thoughts do you want to leave us with today?
Sure. So I guess my last question would be, are you innovating as quickly as the world around you? There was an article published by Forbes a couple of weeks ago, and the article cited that fundraising is up in 2020, 28%, with more than $7 billion raised so far, even with coronavirus. And so the challenge is, the question is, how much of that has been allocated to your organization? And, what are you doing to keep up right now? Why is your why more important now than it ever has been before? And how are you articulating that? Number two is, you can do this. You can do this. And working with a great, AV and video production company and a mobile bidding platform and an event planner, I promise you can do this. And if you don't believe me, go watch the video. I think it was sent in the chat. Go check that video out. We show you exactly how you can do it, the steps to take. And then number three is, how do you want your event to feel? everybody's on Zoom and go to webinar and Google Hangouts with their boss and their colleagues. So my challenge is, do you want your event to feel like a DIY, meeting with your boss or your colleagues, or do you want your event to feel like an exceptional experience that converts transactional donors who are just getting to know your organization into lifelong partners? I think that's what you have to leave people with. Blow people away.
Yes, I agree with that. Okay, and Marilyn, over to you for your few thoughts you want to leave us with.
Okay, yeah, I think this is the third time I'm going to say this, but definitely hire a tech expert in live stream. Starting, back in March, my staff and I were spending most of our time watching live events and other organizations while we were planning for our own. And something that I realized is when things go bad in a live stream, they go really bad. And if you don't have, the right tech partner that has you set up with, proper internet and the know-how to avoid any problems, it's really worth investing in that. And a little bit about the net cost is, my next item, what I said before, your food and beverage costs are going to be way down, and definitely make sure you are putting, some of that money into your production and your production team. And then last, I think, call on the support of others. I have been just, so happy with the events industry and how everyone's helping each other. People who, maybe were competing previously, were just joining forces to try to help. And, I know I'd be more than happy to, speak to anyone after this, or, just reach out. And if you see an event that you liked, call the development team, and I'm sure they'd be happy to share some of their tips with you.
Amazing. Thank you. So now we're going to jump into Q&A and address as many as we can. If we don't get to your questions today, no worries, because we will have our team follow up with you directly. So just keep that in mind. So kind of talking about the live streams, Joey, this is a question for you. If we want to live stream on every platform, how should we market these so that it doesn't cause confusion?
That's a great question. How do you market it so it doesn't cause confusion? I think that probably deserves more of a one-on-one conversation, because there are a lot more pieces to that I need to understand to help you market and communicate that the right way. Okay,
sure. So we will get that person connected with you. We also are getting a lot of questions, Joey, Marilyn, questions for you about what can people expect in terms of a cost range when hiring a production company to produce a 1-hour virtual event?
It depends. So we're working with organizations who, who want to do something very simple, simplistic, and that costs one price, versus an organization who, they want a bunch of pre-recorded videos. Like, for instance, next week, my team's going to Kansas City to produce 4 videos for this virtual gala that we're producing in September. So it just depends on the level of complexity of your event. I would tell you, work with a production agency, AV and video production, that's not a one size fits all, that gives you a consultative, hey, what type of vision do you have for this event? What type of experience do we want to create? And then they give you budget ranges for different options. I think you want to work with a team that is able to pivot and is also able to work and strategize around your budget, whatever that may be.
Okay,
I've been trying to tell all of my, sorry, Kelsey, I've been trying to tell all of my clients that, they should aim to spend with what they had spent in person at their gala. So, and that can be another huge range, depending if you're at a Cipriani, where some of the AV costs are higher, but you can do this for what you would have done at an in-person gala or less.
Totally. And to sort of roll off of that, there are some smaller organizations that don't have budget for hiring a company. And are there any suggestions for very small organizations that they could consider when they go the DIY route?
Ro, what do you think? Yep. So Ro's our production tech in the studio that makes all of these various elements come together. So he says, consult with people, do your research, look at other events online, right? Go to YouTube and just see, like what Marilyn said earlier, just go to YouTube and take a look at some of the other events, see what you like, what you didn't like, right? And start there as a reference point. And then reach out to people like Marilyn or, Utopia and just fire questions. I think you'd be very surprised. We're working with a very small organization that's only been around now for 3 years, and they've opted to invest money into the production. And they actually came out producing about $100,000 in revenue for their event, much higher than they had anticipated. So I think you'd be surprised right now how much people are actually giving when you do it the right way and make it feel like an experience.
I did that real quick. Just one thing on that, Kels, is we have some examples of organizations that have done some really great DIY with pre-recorded elements that we've shared throughout. So one of some of the fundraising successes and the outside the room webinars is resources as well. There are organizations that are accomplishing it, not at the level maybe that Joey and his team or Marilyn and her team are able to accomplish, but they're still pulling off a really strong event by following the principles that we all are talking about here.
Okay, hopefully everyone caught some of that. Brendan, your audio was a bit choppy, but moving on for a question about drive-ins. Joey, how do you go about getting the license to show movies for a drive-in?
Oh my goodness, we just went through this process and it was so enjoyable. So if you are selling tickets for your drive-in, then you have to go through, Ro, what's the website? I'll tell you what, email me and I will send you the website. How about that?
Okay, we will do that. And this maybe for Marilyn, in your experience, what is the best platform for a virtual event? For example, Facebook Live, Zoom, WebEx, YouTube Live.
Yeah, so for the ones we've produced so far, we had a really great experience with YouTube. I think people are just inclined to go there. We had, a couple of options available, and our numbers on YouTube were tremendous. And but just to add to that, we also had either one of my staff, a volunteer, or the organization staff monitoring the chat in all of those platforms, starting off the conversation, and that was a really great way to engage people. It was a lot of fun. Like, where are you at? And we were seeing we had people calling in internationally, and keeping the conversation going with them.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that there. And kind of going off of that with live streaming, and Marilyn, I know previously you talked about accessibility, and a question here is, how are you dealing with accessibility on the virtual feed? Are you using closed captioning? This is very important to us and our older donors.
That's a very good question. We were actually talking to a client about that yesterday. So the first event that we had done, like I said, we were so close to the event date and put it together very quickly. We ended up we needed to also translate that. So we had like Spanish translation put on and then hosted on YouTube after the event. So you can direct people to, to your event afterwards. You can also embed it in your own website and direct them there. And I think, we were even, if you're talking about people being able to have the technical knowledge to log in, we sent out some kind of cheat sheets to our board members that weren't too into technology on how to do it at their own home. And I know in some cases we did like a step-by-step call with them to make sure they were able to see.
Could I add one thing there? Because we actually have an event coming up this Saturday for an organization that serves the disability community, and so everything has to be audio captioned and transcribed. Anyway, so just to expand on that, captioning works really, really well with pre-recorded videos. We can caption everything before it ever goes live. The only challenge is a lot of platforms right now are having, we're noticing a lot of issues on these native platforms that do streaming like Zoom, GoToWebinar, Google Hangouts. They haven't gotten down the audio description piece yet, but captioning works exceptionally well for pre-recorded video so that you can make it very, very seamless for, for your end user.
Okay, great. Another question for you, Marilyn, and maybe also Brandon, but we're getting some questions on communication. How are you handling communications for the people who might be at the in-person part of your event, and then also the people who are participating virtually? And how are you differentiating the two?
Brandon, did you want to answer that first?
Yeah, I can jump in. So differentiating between in-person and virtual, I mean, the key thing is making sure that each party knows their run of show. Obviously, if you're using technology, text message communication with the virtual people is going to be the easiest. That's going to be top of mind. Wherever they're located, they're going to get that instantly. So communicating throughout and in advance, letting people know when things will be available. So for instance, if you're doing premier auction items that are only going to be available for a certain amount of time, both parties need to know that. People who are in the room need to be aware that there's a virtual component. That is very important as well. So when you're communicating that out, let them understand that, but also invite them if they would like to, participate, with text messaging in and all that to make it easier with them in the room. That'll be obviously an easier experience overall. So that communication is, clear often and in the best ways possible that are going to be reaching them really real time. So think about email, think about text message, but also throughout and before being clear.
I think following the same rules that you would have for your live gala as well. I mean, you have to be really organized and have clear communication. Like you would be sending separate information to those maybe attending a VIP reception and those who were not, and those who were invited to an after party. So I think, being very organized and having a clear communication plan ahead of time.
Totally. And I think we have time for one more question. And Marilyn, this is for you regarding COVID-19 and the pandemic. Kind of a two-part question. One is, where can organizations look to find the up-to-date, rules and restrictions for their city and state? And then also, how is the messaging for social distancing issues posed for in-person gatherings? And again, this is kind of a communications question. How are you managing that messaging? Sure.
I think that honestly, by next week, I would have much better answers to this question. As I mentioned in the beginning, my staff is right now out at some site surveys. I know that all of the venues have very clear handouts and communication on how they're handling even just these site surveys. So for example, this morning we received an email saying, when you arrive, make sure you have a mask, we will have automated hand sanitizers for you. We'll follow these protocols when you enter. So I think we're just like on the cusp of understanding what's going to happen now that these venues are just opening. But then as far as finding out, what's happening in your community, I can only really speak to New York City, but and New Jersey, I'm signed up like for text alerts through the government websites for any updates. But that's something, the first question I can, maybe send some more research as we get that to Brandon and Kelsey, and we can share that to anyone who's interested.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That is a great idea. And that is all the time that we have today. So just want to say thank you to Marilyn and Joey and Brandon again for taking the time today. Again, we had tons of questions come through, so if we didn't get to you, our team will follow up with you, but we ask that you please be patient with us due to the volume. So it may take a couple of days. And if you want to further speak with Marilyn or Joey, or any of us at GiveSmart, we're going to have a survey that will pop up after this. So please take the time to answer that survey and indicate if you would like to speak with anyone. Additionally, that will just pop up in just a moment. And finally, tomorrow we are going to continue our Outside the Room series with an organization called Place of Hope to discuss all of the virtual campaigns that they have run this summer. And then later on in August, we're going to talk more about engaging champion fundraisers and how they can help your organization's bottom line and level of awareness. So Thank you all for joining today. Again, please fill out the survey so that we can improve in the future and connect you with Joey and Marilyn. And have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye.
Thanks,
everyone.
you all.
Bye.